So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our special guest co-host. We have been looking forward to today, and we're so excited that our guest co-host was gracious enough to accept our invite. I will share that she is vacationing this week, but she still said yes. And I see that as an incredible honor, as an incredible gift to each of us. And so I hope that you will help me at the appropriate time in welcoming our guest co-host. And so today I am welcoming Tara J. Frank. And as a sought-after equity consultant, speaker, and leadership experience designer, Tara J. Frank helps organizations define a vision and develop strategies to accelerate their culture and leadership goals. She founded Career Modeling LLC, and she spent 21 years at Hallmark Cards, Inc. I want to hear about that experience, Tara, where she was the company's first Black female vice president, and at the time of her promotion to executive management, the youngest person to rise into senior leadership in Hallmark's history. Today, Tara works closely with Fortune 500 companies across consumer goods, retail, technology, finance, aerospace, defense, sports, media industries, as well as member organizations like Network of Executive Women and the Executive Leadership Council to customize talent solutions and facilitate equity-based learning experiences through conferences, intense leadership programs, workshop panels, and keynote addresses. In 2015, Tara published her first book titled Say Yes, A Woman's Guide to Advancing Her Professional Purpose, a practical tool to help emerging leaders reach their own professional high grounds. She is also the visionary behind More Than, which is a movement, a nonprofit founded to facilitate deeper understanding between disconnected people. Her second book, The Waymakers, is set for publication this year, 2021. So we're definitely going to talk a good bit about that today. Tara, although she's in Florida today while she's vacationing and joining us, she lives in Dallas, Texas with her husband, John, 4 of their 6 children, and you can't forget the fur babies. And so there are 3 dogs. Help me pleased to welcome Tara to today's conversation. Yes, Tara.
Hello,
So
hello. Good morning.
Hello. Good morning. And so I always like to start by giving our guest co-host an opportunity once the audience have had a chance to hear your accolades, your credentials, just to greet us in your own way. Tell us your story, share with us the lens that you bring to this conversation of diversity, equity, inclusion, leadership, and help us to know you better at a deeper level than what we cannot find and know from you just by reading your bio.
Oh my goodness. Well, there's a lot baked into what you just said. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and big thanks to your team for helping us get prepared to have this conversation today. I've been really looking forward to it. I'm always grateful to talk to people like you who are so committed to this space and doing wonderful work. So I'm honored to be here. I also, if I were to kind of describe myself, I think to people who do not know me personally, I would say that I am a bridge builder. Probably the best way for me to articulate the work that I do. And I honestly think about that through several different lenses. So in my consulting practice, the bridges that I build are relative to culture, right? I go into companies, I help them understand where they are today, kind of the ground they're standing on. I help them envision their preferred destination, right? Where do they want to go? What do they aspire to? Who do they want to be when they grow up is one of the ways that I talk about it. And then what we do together is build a bridge from current state to future state. So I'm a bridge builder in that way. But the other way that I am a bridge builder, which I take very much to heart, is I try to build bridges between people. And lately, historically, I'll say, to be fair, but I think emphasized lately is that each of us in kind of our own bubbles, our own groups have been more deeply entrenched in our own personal perspectives of the world, right? Our own belief systems, our own desires, our own wants. And the more firmly entrenched we get in each of those poles, the deeper kind of the chasm grows between us as people. And the challenge with that is when we do separate ourselves in that way, when we're not able to really be advantaged by other people's perspectives, their knowledge, their care and compassion even, then the people who ultimately are harmed by that are Black and brown people. and women and LGBT, right, community members and anyone who exists on a dimension of difference. And so I'm all about building bridges between people, between ideas and entities, right? Between where we are today and where we want to be tomorrow. And that's what I'm focused on. That's my life's work.
I just realized I was mute, but I said I love it. Bridge builder. Yeah, that's beautiful. So one of the things that's always interesting to me is to get a deeper understanding about one's journey into this space. Oftentimes we hear people say that one population is not necessarily a monolith, and we have to make sure that we're understanding all of the different intersecting identities that people have that causes them to show up the way that they do. So give us a little bit of your DEI story and intersecting identities that shapes maybe the way in which you like to do this work and how you show up and interact. Share with us, Tara.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So there's certainly, which to be honest, I didn't give much thought to until maybe the last year and a half, but there is a history of my story personally that I believe has created this bridge builder DNA in me, which I'll talk about a little. But there's also a professional journey, and that one is very pointed for me. Like, it's really clear when I made certain pivots that led me into the work that I'm in now. From a personal standpoint, I am Cape Verdean. I grew up in New Bedford, Massachusetts. For those who don't know, Cape Verde Islands are off the west coast of Africa. Gained independence in '75 from Portugal. It was a colony and became independent, an independent African nation in 1975. My grandparents were born there. Cape Verdeans, if you know any, can be as white as the whitest white person you ever met, or as dark as the darkest Black person you ever met. And so my family is a range of all of that. And so the way we showed up in the world, the way we interacted, the people that we loved and were loved by, were all across the color spectrum. And I think that's part of why and how the way I see the world is through a very human lens, but also with respect for each and every person's individual lived experience, right? And how that either makes their life harder or easier, et cetera. So my lens is broad, I think, is the first thing I would just like to share. I then went to Spelman College, which was its own, really unique experience for me, and have since lived in the Midwest. I live in the South now. So been all over the place, and I think always very curious about the expansiveness of humanity. And I couldn't do what I do effectively if I did not have that perspective. Professionally, I started at Hallmark in product development. So I started as a greeting card writer. Greeting card writers are, as we like to joke, pseudo psychologists. The job is to understand human behavior, human motivation, what creates a strong relationship, what potentially breaks down a strong relationship, how people, again, mend connections, right? How they build them over time. This is what you have to know, understand, feel, embody if you want to be a good greeting card writer. It's a lot more complicated than people give it credit for. And you have to do all of that in very few words. So I started there, and I spent a long time in creative product development, which required, again, that we had a deep insight into that human motivation and relational life. And when I was doing that, the higher I got in that position, I kind of realized that it's hard to sustainably meet the needs of an evolving demography when you don't have enough people on the inside who reflect those realities.
Right.
So I became really passionate about talent, about diversifying talent through the lens of the marketplace, right? My work life started in marketplace, not in HR, not in talent, not in organizational development, but in product, sales, right? Retail, and ultimately marketing. So that's kind of where it started. I'm like, I'm passionate about talent because we need to bring more people in. We need to unleash that talent so that we can be more relevant to more people more often. Well, I got passionate about talent and then started to kind of realize, gee, I think about it like a vineyard, a metaphor. You have a vine, you have the soil, and then you have the climate. So the vine is the individual leader. The soil is the company culture, right? That climate. I mean, and the climate is society, the societal impact on that company culture and on the individual. Well, I realized that from a talent perspective, I could focus on individual talent till I was blue in the face.
Yeah.
But if the soil was dry, if the culture was not supportive, then that vine would not thrive. And so it became a shift from marketplace to talent, right? From talent to culture. And culture is really where I work now. So when people ask me who are my customers, who is my audience, I try to bring everybody along with me. But
Mhm.
honestly, I spend most of my time talking to white men,
Yeah.
because those are the people who are leading these corporations and who need to embrace a new understanding, right, of culture and take personal responsibility in shifting it.
No, I love that, Tara. And those of us who are in this space that have been following your work, we are very grateful that that is where you spend the most of your time. There is a big need there, and I love the way in which you've threaded your experience as you were telling your story of how in which you arrived at this work and vine, soil, and climate. That was beautiful. I love that. I'm also really intrigued by the fact that, and I read this before even today, that your career at Hallmark started with being a greeting card writer. And as you were talking, it just reminds me, I'm the type person that when I do go in and pick out a card, you're right, words matter. Language is so important. So I do agonize over all of the cards. And I will tell you, as a Black woman, when I'm in the store, I go straight to the mahogany section because I want to see people who look like me reflected in my cards. And so that was so huge when Hallmark took that leadership role to do that. And so share with us a little bit about what that process was like, if you can. And I don't know how much work you were able to work directly on the mahogany cards, but just help us understand a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, first, I just want to say that Mahogany actually celebrated its 30th anniversary a couple
Wow.
of years ago. So Mahogany was around a lot longer than many of us had a sense of, right? Or
Yeah.
before many of us actually engaged with the product, purchased it, sent it,
Mm.
et cetera. And it was, one of my good friends, Kim Carter, who actually recruited me from Spelman. She was on the team. She convinced Hallmark at the time to go to Spelman to look for talent. And so I credit her. She was a waymaker of mine. We'll talk about that later, but I credit her with the fact that I ever ended up there in the first place, because that's where they found me, and that's kind of where all of this started. But so Mahogany's been around for a while. Clearly, Kim and other folks recognized a need and an opportunity, right? I'll say a business opportunity, but certainly a consumer need that needed to be met in a unique way. Um, I worked on Mahogany several different times over the course of my career. So I wrote for Mahogany, yes, among other things. I wrote for everything except for humor, which I really sucked at. I'm a little too sentimental, I think, to write humor cards. I was really bad at it. But everything else I wrote cards for. I worked on Mahogany as an editor. I worked on Mahogany as an editorial director. When I became creative director of Everyday Cards, Mahogany was in my purview.
Yeah.
When I later kind of designed and stood up a multicultural center of excellence, a big part of the work we were doing is really trying to amplify Mahogany and figure out how we could bring in new talent and new perspectives. That's when we worked with Jill Scott, for example, and we did some cards with her. I was behind that partnership. So yeah, there were lots of different intersections over the years. It's a beautiful brand. I think as with any brand, you have to continue to invest in it and continue to cultivate it. There were peaks, right, on that investment journey, and there were also valleys, quite frankly, on that investment journey. It's good to know now. I've been gone a few years, but I think they're really starting to invest in it again, in a more meaningful way, and have a new leader who's behind it. Her name is Alexis. I've not had a chance to meet her, but I'm hearing really good things. So hopefully we'll see that continue to blossom.
No, I love that. I don't think I realized it's been 30 years, and it sounds like that
Mhm.
was a surprising talking point that you shared from others in this community as well. So I just want to remind you that we do have closed caption for anyone that needs that extra support today, and feel free to turn those cameras on. We want to see those smiling faces, and if you cannot turn your camera on, we do respect and value that as well. I also want to remind you that we love engagement, so feel free to use the chat feature to help center your voices and your contributions to the conversation. We will also at some point shift and invite audience members to feel free to unmute yourselves and to present your direct questions or thoughts and reflections to the conversation. So just wanted to remind you of that. So let's talk about the book that you're working on right now that is scheduled to release this year, and it's called The Waymakers. So at a high level, I don't want to give it all away, of course, but I do want to give you a chance to let us know what we have to look forward to, Tara.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking me about the Waymakers. I greatly appreciate that. Just, to give some quick details, we're looking at a publication date of early December, trying to be ready for pre-sale period in early September. So I'm excited about it. So the Waymakers is really, it's a why to and how to book
Mm,
for leaders with a heart to make a way for underrepresented talent,
love it.
but who don't know how.
Mm,
So what I'm finding right now in my work with majority executives, right, is that there are a lot of people out there who really want to do things differently, who want to help unleash talent that may not be like them. But one of three things is happening. Either one, they are hesitant, they are tentative, they are afraid. They don't want to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, step in it, right? So they're really hesitant, and you're not really able to drive change from a place of
right.
hesitancy. The second thing is they are ill-informed. They do not know enough contextually about what's happening inside their organization and also in society at large. And so that unsure piece also comes from just not knowing enough. But the third is they're ill-equipped. So I
Mm,
like to tell people this is not just about education, right?
yeah.
It's also about experiential learning. It's about training people, equipping them with tools, with
Mhm.
strategies, with frameworks, right? Even sometimes with scripts, to be honest. I mean, I get that detailed at times. So the book provides, from an education standpoint, it provides insight and information about this contextual landscape that we're all operating in. It also provides strategies and tools, so the equipment piece. And then it also asks people to be brave, right?
Yeah.
It asks people to get off the fence and into the arena. And that to me is part of what's really powerful here. The Waymaker premise is that everyone has an opportunity to make a way for someone else, and we need more people to do so, to commit to that work.
I love that. I love the title. It's so fitting based upon how you've described the content that's been that's finding its way into this work that you are in the midst of. And I love the fact that you're amplifying the need for bravery, around this work. It is hard, and some people will shy away because they are of the persuasion that I don't want to make a mistake. And we often say at NWC that we have to lean into that, choose courage over comfort. And even as we talk about being brave, it doesn't mean that you're always going to get it right. It means that you may have to be held accountable when you get it wrong. But I have a colleague that says often accountability shouldn't feel like shame, right? So we
Yes. Oh
have
my
to be,
gosh.
yeah. And so I love that. And I know that you said later this year it's going to be releasing. Do you have more of a timeline that you can share with us that will
Yeah,
allow us to
yeah.
know when to start looking out for it?
Absolutely. So when I'd really love people to start looking out for it is in early September. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I will be sharing updates, obviously, but the pre-order period, as I think you all know, is super important for just kind of the success of the book. So as soon as it's available for pre-order, which will be around September, I will share that information, and it'll be, we'll have a website and there'll be links to purchase and all that. One of the ideas I'd really like to share, if it's okay, about this whole
Please.
bravery and accountability and knowing that it might be hard or uncomfortable and we'll probably make mistakes. One of the things that my clients sometimes ask me is, okay, Tara, well, what's the silver bullet? And they're being facetious, but I think they actually want me to share one. And so I always say there isn't one, but if there were, right? But if there were, it would be, it would be this. So anytime you're going through any kind of change, right? If you think about tipping point theory, et cetera,
Mhm.
you're going to have, the Pareto principle. You're going to have 20% of the people on the front end of that change. Like, let's go, let's change. I'm ready, right?
Right.
Being brave, breaking down walls. You're going to have 20-ish% of people on the other end digging their heels in, crossing their
Yeah.
arms,
Yeah.
essentially saying, I like it this way. I don't want anything to change. And clearly they're happy with being advantaged. Why would they not be? But
Right.
in any case, you're going to have 60% of the people who are just observing, who are sitting on the fence, who are watching what's happening, potentially feeling badly about what's happening, wishing it were not happening. but not necessarily seeing themselves as having an active role in facilitating the change. And
Yeah.
Dr. Martin Luther King, right, in Letter from Birmingham Jail, talked about them as the white moderate, for example. Everybody quotes him as talking about silence as being complicity.
Yeah.
The way I think about it is if we can get this 60% of the people who, again, have a heart to be part of something
Yeah.
good, but not necessarily yet the mindset or the handwork. They don't know how, they don't know what, and they don't know how. If we can get that 60%, again, off the fence, that's where everything shifts. Because imagine you have 10 people in a room. I find this a really helpful frame. You have 10 people in a room, right? One of them is an aggressor, meaning
Mhm.
they are perpetuating harm onto one other person in the room. So you have one person who is aggressing, you have one person who is being aggressed upon, and then you have 8 people who are watching. In the scenario where the 8 people are silent and watching, all of the attention and the pressure and the burden is on the person being aggressed against,
Yeah.
right? If all of a sudden those 8 people decided they were going to speak up or intervene or call out what was wrong or say this is not okay, the attention and the burden would then shift to the aggressor. And
Mhm.
so the role of all of us is to stop being bystanders, is to stop hanging out on the fence. That is the way we free people who are being harmed, is we shift the tide, right, in the other direction. So I just wanted to share that as a frame, because that's why I'm really trying to make more waymakers in this world, so that we can actually shift these cultures by just behaving differently, right, and seeing ourselves as playing a role.
I love that, Tara. That resonates with me so much, and I'm seeing from the chat that it's certainly resonating with others as well. There's so much to unpack with what you said. One is the amplification of the need to be strategic and thinking about a change management process when we're really trying to shake up organizations, especially around the work of equity and inclusion, where there's so much complexity because people don't understand it. There's different mental models in which they're entering those conversations, different expectations, and some can't even name the problem, name it as a
Yeah.
problem, which let alone they're not willing to engage in discussion about it being a problem.
Mhm.
And so that change management piece is really important. And I love how you also were able to amplify that being witness to. I mean, it's being a victim of is one thing, being the aggressor obviously is one thing, but being witness to, there's a responsibility there. And
Yes.
so many people will sit on the sidelines and feel as though, okay, I'm not the one being the aggressor, so it's not my issue, you know? And silence is a message. And I think about all the times that you have leaders, people that are to be modeling certain, inclusive behaviors, that are sitting silent when these situations are occurring, and how that must give others who are looking on the permission to think, okay, well, this is okay then. This person tolerates that.
Yeah, well, they're
So,
not willing to take the personal or reputational risk, which is
yes,
why I say that we need all the would-be waymakers off the fence. Because if any one person believes I am going to alone by myself take on this personal or reputational risk by intervening, then that's really, really scary. But if each of them
yes,
realize that no, if we all play our role here, it's a lot less scary and a lot
yep,
less possible. I
yes,
think we get to a different place.
yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's more effective. It's more effective. You're outnumbered at that point in time.
Yeah, I will tell you, remember earlier I mentioned one of the reasons why people don't make the change is that they're just afraid, they're hesitant, they're tenuous, they
Yeah,
don't know what to say. People literally, like, we sometimes get frustrated when people ask really, really pointed questions. Like, they want us to hold their hand through some of this evolution.
yeah,
But sometimes it's necessary, because they literally, they just get paralyzed. I'll give you the number one question I get asked when I do work, like training work, like
mm-hmm.
how to actually show up or intervene for people in the moment when it matters. People always say, what do I say if I'm in a room and I see somebody say something foul toward someone else or toward a group? Like, I don't know what to say. Like,
Yeah,
this is how exact they get. And I
yeah,
share with them, there are 3 responses. Like, just to get really pointed, there are three responses. The first is to look at the person, the aggressor, and say, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Imagine being in a room, someone says something foul, and then someone else looks at them and says, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
In that moment, you are making them accountable for the words that came out of their face.
Yep.
You're first pausing, you're stopping the conversation and letting everybody know something happened here that was unclear or uncool. You're then looking in the eye of the person who said it, and again, making them eat their words in a sense. Like, you were brave enough to say it, now you should be brave enough to define it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're also giving them an opportunity to become conscious of what they said.
Right.
Maybe they were
Right.
not. So the first is to just ask somebody, what do you mean by that?
I
The
love that.
second is to call out the relevance of the comment. I'm not sure how is that relevant to our conversation?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's egregious, I tell people you have to say so. That's
Oh,
not appropriate,
absolutely. Yeah,
right?
that's not appropriate. We don't do
Yeah,
that here. That's not our culture
all
here.
of
We don't
that.
do that here. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
There are
And that
some
takes
questions in there.
bravery. Yeah, there are
Yes,
lots of
it
great
does.
questions. I know we're going to get to them. So
I
here's what I
know.
want to do. Because there have been so many questions, I want to invite anyone right now who is willing to unmute yourself and ask your question directly. That'll give me a chance to kind of catch up with the chat. But just feel free to unmute yourself and present your question directly.
Woohoo! It's Andrea.
This is Leroy.
I beat you, Leroy.
No, Leroy.
So we'll go to Andrea, then to Linroy. Go ahead, Andrea.
All righty, thank you. I won't be long. Tara, I appreciate your comments. To me, I want to go back to these senior leaders that you're working with. Skills, information, business case, the whole 9 yards. But at some point, and what I do in my work is try to build trust and credibility. Because at some point, you need to be able to connect with that leader who, by the way, has been successful, top of their game, whatever they're doing right. Connect with them authentically or in a safe way that says, okay, we're now going to learn something different. You got to be there with it, figure it out so that you come out the other side and then use your understanding of the needs of your industry and organization to keep on leading, but you've got this other understanding. So it's a tool in your toolkit, but there also has to be a personal/professional individual reckoning. So I often say, so it's kind of like, let's do an activity behind closed doors where nobody's judging, nobody expects you to be on top of your game, and let's really spend time with it. So my question is, can you give me some examples of if and how you've done that successfully? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrea, for that question. So one of the things that I've been doing over the last year plus, and this isn't the only one, but it's a good example, is I ask the executives, and I do this at the C-suite level, to read Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail in its entirety before we get together. And then we will spend, let's say we have a 90-minute session, we will spend 30 minutes of the 90 asking each and every person to share their reflection from the letter. And so what happens here is they have to read the letter, which many of you probably know, has so many crucial concepts in it that are still relevant today. So they have to read it. They have to take all of that in. It's 8 pages of brilliance. Then they have to think about what they think about it. And then they have to share out loud what really stuck with them. So the way I usually ask it is, what really stuck with you? Like, what were you still thinking about the next day? You know, what surprised you? What was unexpected for you? And as each person shares, I do exactly what you're talking about. I validate their perspective in that moment and take an opportunity to add data, usually, either anecdotal or hard data. And so as we do that with each and every person, we make connections through that process. We humanize each other through that process. I often will also ask them to share where they grew up before they share their reflection. Because if I'm able to, I will make connections there. Oh, I used to live there. Or, oh, you live in such and such place. Have you ever tried their barbecue? I mean, whatever. But making that connection up front, and then we kind of get into some key concepts. And it's also in the way that I share the concepts, because I talk about them, I think, through very accessible examples and analogies. And it helps people get things in ways they may not otherwise get them. So, one of the more powerful ones is I talk about these 3 levels of culture. And I say culture exists on the level of the claim, the policy, and the norm. So the claim is who we say about ourselves. The policies are the things we put in place to reinforce those claims. But the norms are how we choose and behave every single day, right? And that's really where culture is created and sustained. And so I use that example of like television advertising, and I always joke because some of them inevitably are a little bit younger. And I'm like, 15, 20 years ago, before social media was really a big player in advertising, a company would put out a really great TV commercial with a celebrity everybody loved and tell them we have the best soft drink in the land, and everyone would just believe it. They'd be like, Michael Jackson said it, it must be true. And they'd go out and to buy it. These days, it doesn't work that way. You can tell people you have the best soft drink in the land, but somebody's going to try it. If they hate it, they're going to tell other people that it's terrible. They might even create little TikToks about how bad it is and Facebook groups about how bad it is. And the truth is that your soft drink is not popular, no matter what you say. And what I share with them is that's the same thing about your culture. You can tell people you have a diverse and inclusive culture, but your employees define that, not you. So just an example of just kind of shaping some of these ideas in a way that people can actually get, that takes it from theory, right, to practice.
Love it. Lynn Roy, you're up next, and then we'll go to Victor. I see your hand. Lynn Roy and then Victor.
Thank you. And thanks for coming on today. It's been great discussion already. I re-put the comment that I put into the chat, but I'm interested in your thoughts specifically about work that you've done with companies like Goldman Sachs, PwC, P&G, Boeing, Lilly, and companies very much like them. These are companies that would say, we do it right. You could take the same, scenario and put individuals that will say, we do it right. White male that does a dissertation on Blacks at predominantly white institutions. I've had multiple conversations with people like this, and they're like, I got it right. But we know that those individuals can really have opportunities to have better results. And the companies that I name, I've worked with all of them at some point in time. And I was just curious, and what made me ask you this and give you the scenarios because you've worked with PGA Tour out of Jacksonville, and I've had some work with them. And I'm just curious of things that you've done with these kind of powerhouse type companies, or the person that we know that they really need some more work.
Oh, this is such a good question. I will say, and I see that Anne actually made a comment that it mirrors what I'm about to say. The companies I work with that are doing it right, don't say they're doing it right.
Right.
So a couple of those companies you listed, I do work with. I have or I do right now. And the ones that I think are doing it the best acknowledge that they have so much more work to do. They are committed, they are clear, right, about what success looks like for them. They are holding people accountable for behaving in new ways and for engaging in experiences that are going to make them better leaders. They are measuring their success in multiple ways, not just one-dimensionally, but multidimensionally. And they are saying repeatedly, we have a long way to go. We're seeing some signs of progress. Here is what they are. So they're also transparent, right? But they're saying we have a long way to go. They're also collaborating with people who have been disadvantaged to design, right, and execute against some of these ideas. So it's not like you have people at the top who are majority white figuring out what the future should look like, right, and how it should operate, and then just kind of pushing all of that down to the people who know best what great looks and feels like. They're doing it collaboratively. So that's what I would say, that there are companies in your list who are doing exactly what I just articulated to you. And those are the ones that I enjoy partnering with the most, because they know that this is a journey and they know they have a lot to learn.
Tara, that is so rich. And we're going to get to Victor in just a second. And then after Victor, Mark has a question for you as well. But I just wanted to add on to what you just shared. I feel similarly about organizations that are quick to ask for a benchmark, right? How do we stack up against other organizations? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, why is that even relevant? Unless you're at 100% on all of those key questions, why does it matter? Your competition is against yourself, trying to get better and elevate from where you are. And so at NWC, we really don't even engage in a lot of benchmarking work. When we do, it's more about programmatic operational ideas that could be scaled to size or tweaked and modified to fit organizations based upon their needs, but not from a standpoint of how do we stack up against our DEI efforts with other organizations, because it sends this false expectation that we have arrived, and we all know there's no arrival to this work, you know? So anyway, I appreciate what you shared. Victor.
Thanks for allowing me to comment. Tara, also thank you for accepting my request to connect on LinkedIn. I already thought before you even spoke here today that you have a really interesting perspective on life in general. And I like your frankness, no pun intended.
Thank you. I have a lot of frankness, yes.
Yeah. Kind of considering everything that's been said up to this point, what happens when you encounter false fixed beliefs held not by abject racists and xenophobes, but held by moderates and liberals? I had a conversation recently with a coworker, and I just ended it by saying that it's been my experience, my personal experience, that I've encountered more racism, if you consider racism as an idea and not an action. I've encountered more racism from liberals than I have ever from racists, because those people we consider racist avoid me altogether. Liberals say things like they love me because I'm Black, not out, not verbally, but their behavior, their posture is they love me because I'm Black, or they love my friend Randy because he's gay, or they say things like, really weird things like, my gay friend. And to that, I've always responded, if you have a gay friend, that person is not your friend. That person is a prop for your whatever. So anyway, so the other part of this question, and it is a question, believe me, is responding to, I believe, no one is doing it right, not even me. The question should be, how can we do it better because of these false fixed beliefs? And so I'm going to stop talking now and see what you have to say.
Well, first of all, thank you for your kind words, and I'm glad to be connected. The second thing I'll say is I actually have shared on LinkedIn a couple of times now this grid that I call the will and the skill, managing dialogue. And there are 4 quadrants on it. So I'm getting to your question by sharing this frame. There are 4 quadrants. So one of them is the will. One of the axes is the will, and that means openness, like the degree of openness that the person has, right, to new ideas, new ways of thinking about what they're already thinking. The other axis is skill. And so I think about that as perceived knowledge. Like if it's low on skill, they don't know anything at all and know that they don't, if it's high, then they know more or they think they know more. Okay. So at the intersection of will and skill, you have some interesting things happening. You can have what I call in these conversations, a confident contributor. And the way I think about a confident contributor high on will and skill is that they have done their research, they have done their homework, they understand, at least on a surface level, what some of these issues are, and they also understand that they don't understand, right? And so those are really important voices in these conversations because you can amplify them. You can use them to help you make other points. What you have when people think they know a lot, but they're not open, which is what you're talking about, is something that I call misguided conjecture. So some people think they know a lot, they have high perceived skill, but they're not open. and they'll say things like what you're talking about, or they'll make comments, whatever. And those, I just like to ask questions of, why do you believe that? How do you know? What else could it be? Right? Ask a lot of questions. There's this other category, though, that might be in what you said that I call inelegant curiosity. So there are a lot of people who are curious, who have a good heart. They're just super clumsy about all of this. They've not had a lot of exposure. They've not really learned much. They know that they care. They know they have good intentions. They don't know a hell of a lot more than that, to be honest. And those people may be curious, but just super inelegant. And what I encourage other people in our work, myself, other peers to do is recognize that you're not dealing all the time with misguided conjecture, which is a low openness, but I think I know it all. Sometimes what you're dealing with is high openness and just really low understanding and knowledge. And so there's an opportunity there to help people fill in the gaps. We always say, it's not my job to teach you. Let me tell you what, if we don't teach people, they won't learn. Yes, they can do research, blah, 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 blah. You and I well know that anything we've learned that is really important to know and understand, we've learned in communication and connection and conversation with other human beings. That is how we as human beings learn and grow, is relating to each other. So there's an element of this that I believe, I'll speak for myself, I can't speak for you, that I have to be open-hearted enough, right? To impart kind of that wisdom. At the end of the day, though, if somebody's harassing me, or like I feel just weighed down by their ignorance, or lack of openness or whatever, I just don't deal with it. Like, I don't have time for that.
Yeah, I love that. If we don't teach people, they won't learn. And that's hard for people sometimes because not everyone has the emotional capital to be in that position of trying to educate others. And so, I do often talk about the importance of self-educating, but I love the perspective that you bring, because for those of us that do have the emotional capital and the wherewithal and the knowledge and the resources, we need to be leaning into that as much as we can to try to take away and eliminate some of those excuses of, well, no one taught me, I don't know. Yeah, we need to be able to hold you accountable. So for those of us who can't, we're going to help right? No,
Right.
that's great.
And I always say that is not, I love what you said, for those of us who have it, because
Yeah.
I recognize that not everybody wants to,
Yep.
right, can or should play that role. And
Right.
I believe that, I always say there's something in the middle between, staunch preservationism and street marching activism. There's a lot in between those two places. And there are many kinds of activists in this work, I believe. And I think those of us who make it our business to teach people, to educate them, to bring them along, to help them get braver, we have an activism of our own.
Yeah.
It takes on a little bit of a different dimension.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that, Tara. Okay, we're going to go to Mark, who has a question, and following Mark, Anne is going to present her question.
Yes, I'm loving this intentional conversation. I feel like they get better and better every week. So I hope those who are joining us for the first time keep coming back. It's a great space to be in. Tara, I saw a post that you did on LinkedIn, and I hope I can share this. It's about your son or your child. I don't know their gender.
A child, yeah.
Yep, your child. And it went kind of viral, and it's Pride Month. So I just want to talk about, you are a parent of a child of the trans experience.
Yep.
How did you get to the space where you were able to be there for them? I think that a lot of parents struggle with the idea of who their child is going to be from conception all the way to the birth and beyond. And so how did you get to a space where you were just able to say, I'm going to hold on to you? They said, hold on to them while they were stagnant. And that was very powerful. So what advice do you have to parents who are on this call or who are listening to the playback about supporting their trans, gender non-conforming, non-binary, LGBTQ plus child?
Oh man, this is like a conversation all in and of itself, but let me try to be succinct here. So it definitely was a journey, is the first thing that I will say. Remember when I talked about the will and the skill? I had really low knowledge, right, about the trans experience. but I've always been at least moderately open. So this is me being transparent. I didn't know enough to be as open as I should have been from the very beginning. I was like, if we go back to the people I talked about earlier, I was unsure, I was ill-informed, and I was ill-equipped. So in this scenario, right, I was that person, unsure or uncertain, ill-informed, and ill-equipped. So part of it was me gaining additional knowledge, asking more questions, getting to know more people, so that I could really start to wrap my mind and heart around what was happening to my child. But the other thing is, there was a lot of pain early on in this process. Like, I knew something wasn't okay. And some of it was some mental health challenges, right? But I knew it was more than that. Like, things that shouldn't have been hard were just really, really hard. And I was like, something's going on here. And so when they actually started to give voice to some of that, it was really easy for me to, it wasn't easy for me to be supportive in the way that they needed right in the beginning, because I didn't know enough. That was a learning process. But what it was easy for me to do is be very, very clear about my intention. And I was very clear about that from the beginning. And my intention was this: look, I love you. There's nothing you can do about it. Nothing you can do about it. I will never stop loving you. I will never let you go into that dark night, no matter what. So I had to be really clear about the fact that there was absolutely nothing they could say or do or not say or not do to change my love for them and my commitment to them and to their well-being and to their happiness. And as long as I was super clear about that intent, I could also say things like, I'm going to step in it sometimes. I'm not always going to say the right thing. I'm going to keep trying, though, until I get it right. And I could also say, call me out when I get it wrong. And this honestly is what I encourage leaders to do inside corporate. Like, be really clear about your intent. Let people know that you might be a little messy along this road, but give them permission to call you out when you get it wrong so that you can learn and do better. So it's been a journey. And I have to say now, they're happy, successful, doing well in school. And I couldn't be more proud or more grateful, to be honest. It's like, it was hard, and there was a lot of pain and a lot of fear for me as a parent, because there were some pretty dark moments. But I shared that because it was a watershed moment for me. They sent me, for those of you who didn't see it, they sent me a text and basically said, I just want you to know that I appreciate that you loved me through all of this, that you held on to me when I wanted to stagnate. And yeah, it was a watershed moment.
Well, I keep hitting the heart reaction because Zoom takes it away after certain seconds. And I'm like, I wanted to stay up the whole time. But yeah, and I'm so glad, Mark, that you brought that to this conversation. It was actually on my list as well. And we talked about it before we actually started today's podcast. And because I was also really touched by that, as so many other people. And I just thought it was beautiful. And I love your suggestion for all leaders around so many different issues. Give people permission to call you out, to correct you. And if your intent, as you mentioned before, is really to get it right and to show forth that level of support and solidarity, then we're going to have to be willing to give people permission to tell us when we're wrong and when we've made the mistake,
Absolutely.
Gosh, that's beautiful. Okay. Anne has a question. You're up next, Anne.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you for coming in on your day off. If you wouldn't mind indulging me in sort of like a specific scenario where for most of this, we've been talking about sort of nuanced evolution of exclusion and, even racism. I want to ask a little bit about good old fashioned overt racism. And you had mentioned, the three kind of key responses. What do you mean by that? How is this relevant? And calling someone out when what they're saying is egregious. So I was in a scenario a few years ago, and I grew up in the South, and I've been on my journey of anti-racism for the past year and change, fairly extensively. But I was visiting my brother's girlfriend's parents, and we were at the dinner table. I was out of state visiting their home, and my brother's girlfriend's brother just dropped the N word casually, like in the middle of a story, not even telling a story about the other person, just, as a secondary character. And I was so surprised and very unsure of how to handle the situation. And my brother and his girlfriend both looked at me like, is she gonna say something? Is she gonna do something? I know she's freaking out right now. And my boyfriend at the time, when I shared the story with him later, he said, if it was me, I would have stood up, I would have stormed out, I would have said, this is not okay. But it's not really in my personality to, flip a table and say, I'm not gonna be here anymore. But especially when it's somebody you're meeting for the first time, you're staying in their parents' home, and it's not someone that I'm, particularly starting a relationship with. But now my brother has proposed, and this person is going to be my sister-in-law's brother. And it's likely I'll see him again. And I'm just wondering, I think it's kind of personality based how to confront such a situation. But I love to hear in your expertise what you might advise when, I want to say something, but I'm just not sure, to what extent I'm going out to rock the boat, really.
I mean, first of all, I thank you for this question. And that's why this is the question I get more than anything, because people want to know what to do when the rubber hits the road. So here's what I will say to you, in a way that fits the time that we have left. It depends what role you believe you want to or should play in that situation. So I think people have three options, and I don't judge any one of the three, because it depends on the role you believe you can and should play in the situation. You can speak up, or step out. So you can speak up and simply just say, that's not okay, or, I don't know why you think that's okay, or that really makes me uncomfortable. And you can just speak up and just let that be that, right? You checked the moment in the moment. You can step up, and step up isn't better than speak up. It's just different. You can step up and try to engage in a conversation to try to shift that energy and see if you can inform the person or educate them or whatever. But in the cases where you don't feel either safe, whatever the case may be, to speak up or step up, you can step out and remove yourself from the situation. And it's important to me to give people options, because I think sometimes through our own lenses, we believe there is one right way to respond in those situations. But it's not always safe or appropriate to do the thing that somebody else wishes you would do. And you have to make that personal choice. So I know I'm simplifying it because of the time that we have, but I would just say, consider, what role do I believe I want to play in this situation, right? And then, am I going to speak up, or step out? Because you can always remove yourself from that kind of situation if that's the only thing you feel safe to do.
Yeah, one thing I kind of settled on is talking to my brother and his girlfriend about how uncomfortable that was, and how I thought, one of them might have been better positioned to say, like, I don't think
you didn't have a relationship.
Okay.
So
right.
That's a consideration when you're asking yourself, what is appropriate or safe for me to do here?
Thank you.
Yeah, no, of course.
Speak up, step out. I love that. Victor, you had unmuted yourself. Did you want to share a comment or question?
Yeah, I was going to just put it in the chat in the interest of time, but I'll go ahead and ask it, and hopefully you have a chance to answer it. Tara, so in regard to this, the current environment, social media is a great outlet for a lot of business people like myself. So how do you advise on posts and dialogues around inclusion and racism in this present evil world we call corporate America, wherein even moderates avoid any minority or LGBT person who even remotely appears uppity as they used to say in the South, I grew up in the South as well, and or militant? That's my question.
Okay, I'm not sure I fully understand it. So when you say
So if you
moderate,
make
what are you
posts
talking about?
that appear,
Mhm.
that have the appearance of having a strong opinion, one way or another, around diversity and inclusion,
Yeah.
and others in corporate America see that, they could take one position or the other where they consider you uppity or militant and therefore move away from you, or they might embrace it and lean in. I don't know. So
Yeah.
how do you advise on making dialogue around that?
So I always ask people, and I ask myself, to consider my purpose. Why am I sharing that, whatever it is that I'm sharing? Sometimes people share things because they're angry or upset or otherwise emotional about an idea or a situation, and they're just self-expressing. If that's the case, then I don't think we can have expectations of other people on how they will respond, because our purpose is just to self-express. If our purpose is to initiate dialogue, is to get people talking, then we have to be mindful about the tone with which we do that and the words we use to do that. Because anytime you want to invite people into a circle, anytime on any topic, you have to be thoughtful about what sounds like an invitation versus what sounds like a kick in the ass. And so I ask, first, consider your purpose and hold expectations, in accordance with that purpose, and make sure that you're coming across in alignment, right, with your purpose. I share things very intentionally. You know what I share? I share very intentionally. I'm mostly talking to white executives, to be honest. That's who I'm mostly talking to. Other people weigh in because they agree, but that's not who I'm talking to most of the time. I'm trying to get them to think differently about their role in this work, right? And so it's very purposeful. So when people engage, that's what I want. I want them to come and ask questions. I want them to weigh in. I want them to share it. So I just invite people to be very intentional.
Great. Well, thank you for that final question, Victor. And I say final because unfortunately we are at the top of the hour. This has been such rich conversation, and I knew that the hour would go by fast. And I'm so grateful. So if you all will just take a moment to please incorporate thoughts of appreciation to our guest co-host, Tara J. Frank. As we close out today, we don't take it lightly that you took time away from your vacation to be with us in this community. We value every moment that we were able to share space with you.